We've got the live stream ready, so that's good.
So Kelly, are we live streaming?
Yes, Mansfield live stream is on, so we should be good to go.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Mansfield Board of Education. My name is Kathy Ward, the board chair. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. The public may view this meeting live at townhallstreams.com or on Charter Spectrum Cable Channel 191. Public comment will be accepted by email at mboesupt@mansfieldct.org, either before the meeting or prior to the second hearing for visitors. Comments may also be sent via mail to care of the Mansfield Board of Education. Celeste, would you call the roll, please? I think you're muted, Celeste.
Yep, sorry about that. Susanna Everett.
I'm here.
Martha Kelly. Edith Allison.
Here.
Rebecca Aubrey.
Here.
David Latrico.
Here.
Catherine Paulus.
Here.
Elizabeth Verge.
Here.
And Kelly Zimmerman.
Okay, thank you, Celeste. Edith, would you read our mission statement, please?
It is the mission of the Mansfield Board of Education, in partnership with the Mansfield community, to ensure that all children acquire the knowledge, skills, and attributes essential for personal excellence in learning, life, and work within our global community.
Thank you very much. Next is approval of minutes. I just want to make one correction here. The minutes are from February 11, 2021, not February 8. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes February 11, 2021?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Dick.
Who are we going to give that to? Sorry.
David won the coin toss.
Okay.
Second.
Second, this is Edith.
Thank you, Edith. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Any corrections? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes of February 11 are approved. Hearing for visitors, have we had any communication or?
We have not had any hearing for visitors.
Okay, thank you. And any communications?
No communications.
Thank you. Are there any additions to the present agenda? I think I'm having some difficulty here, but all right, no additions.
Kathy, I'm so sorry. I didn't see on this agenda. I just want to bring up our pollinator pathway work and get some advice around next steps for that. And that might be not necessarily a board conversation. I might be able to just get some advice from folks. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on there, but I think I mentioned it last time.
Would you like that to go later on with a future agenda item?
Sure.
Okay. I think I'm driving everyone nuts with my video here. That brings us to committee reports. The Finance Committee met on Tuesday, March 9. We reviewed the financial statements dated December 31, 2020. Our general fund revenues, the ECS Educational Cost Sharing Grant, we've received $2.3 million to date, which is on target with our budget. There are no expenditure concerns for the Board of Ed at this time. Our special ed reserve account began the year with a balance of $559,000, and we anticipate remaining on budget. Then the health insurance fund expenditures exceeded revenues by $24,000, which is really minimal when you take a look at the fund balance. And our fund balance is still at $5.3 million as of December 31st, 2020. We always have to keep in mind that to be considered fully funded, we only need a fund balance of $2.1 million. You can see the breakdown of activity for each of the student activity funds on page 39 of your packet. The one fund that we continue to see sharp decline in revenues is the cafeteria fund. Connecticut State Department of Education Child Nutrition Program provides free meals for all students, but the cost of running the program has significant financial implications for not only our food services program, but all across the state. Our staff is confident that the issues of financial sustainability will be addressed as we move forward with COVID relief legislation. Our fund balance decreased to a negative $67,000 as of December 31, 2020. So the Finance Committee is recommending we accept the financial statements for the period ending December 31st, 2020 in the consent agenda. Did Kelly Zimmerman arrive yet? All right, let me just report on the Personnel Committee. We did a first round of negotiations with the secretaries, and we have another one scheduled for next week. Tomorrow we start our first round with the nurses, and we also have a second round scheduled with them next week. That brings us to information, presentations, and actions. Superintendent's report. Martha,
Good evening, everyone. I actually have several slides to share with you this evening, and I'm going to get started with those slides with this report. So I have a lot to share with you this evening, and I'll try to run through these things quickly, but feel free to ask questions if you have any. First, an update on what's happening with regards to schooling during the pandemic. On March 1st, our grade 7 students return for school in person 5 days a week. We continue to receive weekly updates on the effect of the virus from our local public health officials. What we're finding that, like most communities across the state, that Mansfield's year-round residents have declined significantly in the incidence of positive results to COVID testing. In fact, not only are the numbers in the single digits, if you followed it all, the color tracking for each community, I was told last week that if we were only measuring year-round residents in Mansfield, that Mansfield would be out of the red and into the yellow, or I think it's orange actually, zone of the percentage or the positivity rate. So that's good news, and it's allowing us to continue to think about how our schools are operating. In fact, you'll see the last bullet here that to be announced tomorrow. So you are the first public audience to hear this. We will be returning grade 8 students 5 days a week beginning March 29th. We do need a little bit of time. Every time we return a grade at the middle school, we do a tremendous amount of rescheduling. It also has an effect on our remote only students, some of whom also need to have schedules changed. We need to move furniture literally to make sure we've got enough furniture in classrooms for students appropriately spaced. And so it takes us a little while to get this up and running, but we're really excited to know that soon we will have every middle school student who chooses to attend in-person schooling in our building 5 days a week. We have had very little, thankfully, virus in our school over the last 3 weeks, and we are starting to see more students choosing to return from remote learning to in-person learning. Our numbers continue to decline at the beginning of at the end of February, the beginning of March. We were just at 20% of our students remote. It's dropped since then. If I were to calculate it today, I think we'd be about 19%. And my assumption is that by the end of March, we'll see the percentage drop again. So that's from a high, if you'll remember, of about 29% when school opened. So I'm very pleased to see that families have the confidence to send their children back to school. In a few other events happening around the district, one of the things that we were very concerned about when school opened and many communities were using the hybrid model is that we knew we would have staff whose own children would not be in school 5 days a week, and that could pose a real challenge for our staff. And so we first reached out to Mansfield Park and Rec to see if they were able to do anything in order of providing some childcare services, but they just didn't have the flexibility and staff to do that. We heard, however, that a local YMCA camp was allowing some of its college students who were not returning to a college campus to continue to live in their facilities. These are students who have been trained to be counselors at Camp Woodstock and have all been through screenings that we would require of employees as well. And we were very fortunate to, and I think I've shared this with you before, to start a relationship with Camp Woodstock where they came into one of our schools in a kind of isolated classroom, and children of employees could pay for, it wasn't for free, but they could pay for very good care. That care has continued because we've had at least one surrounding community that has been fully remote on Wednesdays. And Camp Woodstock said, as long as we have 5 students, that's our break-even point, we will continue to provide care. And in fact, it's been 5 students 1 day a week for the last couple of months. But that school system is returning to 5 days a week of school. And so we will be saying goodbye to our partners from Camp Woodstock in another 2 weeks. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to give them a shout out and express our appreciation for really helping us out at a tough time, and the accolades from the students and the teachers, the families who utilized that service have just been outstanding. So very glad that we could provide that for our employees and that we had such quality care for their children. Other happenings that you should know about: National History Day did go on this year in a remote format. They actually ended last year's competitions in a remote format as well. Mansfield Middle School once again had many students participate and did very well. We will have students going on to the next round of competition. Later in the spring, we'll have exact numbers to share with you. But I wanted you to know that this experience was provided to both students learning in person and remote. And we even had some teams that were a combination of remote students and in person. So it's one of the many ways that we've found to keep kind of school as we remember it happening this year. And finally, in the blue box there, you'll see the latest draft belief statements, core belief statements that we've been working on as part of your redesign of the strategic plan. And last week, Richard Lemons from the Connecticut Center for School Change held 4 focus groups with community members. He had just over 50 people participate, really great turnout, and he will have lots of information to share with you. We are working to set up 2 workshops in April to get back to the strategic planning work and hopefully complete it. Lots happening in the schools as well. You're going to hear a report later from Mansfield Middle School about some of the wellness activities. One of the things that they're doing to bring joy to their students is a Goodbye Winter Spring into New Ideas festival in the library. I'm only going to let this run for a few minutes. This is a very long video, but what happened is the entire library was transformed and set up in a maze. Students had a scavenger hunt that they participated in as they walked through the middle school saying goodbye to winter. And at the end, they were given a book to keep, books chosen appropriate for their grade level, all around social justice issues. And kids were really excited. I think you'll hear more about that from Candace later this evening. You can see they really outdid themselves. Every inch of this library was transformed. And not only did every student who attends school in person attend, but they held an evening open library also for students who are learning remotely. And also, really exciting news. Our own Stephanie Richards has this great recipe for zucchini kale bread that's served in our cafeterias. It's also been served at some of our community dinners. And it was actually featured today. It came out in the National School Nutrition Association magazine. This is a publication that goes to thousands of school districts and food service employees around the country. And we're really excited that Stephanie was able to be featured in that way. And last time you asked about after-school activities, and Candace shared with you that the middle school was getting ready to begin their clubs. And again, you'll hear more about that in a little bit, but happy to share with you that not only are plans underway, but students will be signing up very soon for after-school activities, and we're getting ready for spring sports as well. So that's my report. I know Kathy's having a little bit of difficulty, so I don't know. Susanna, do you want to jump in?
I can try, but I am not.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yes,
oh,
we can.
Okay. I have no idea what's going on. Next is efforts to address student wellness. Holly?
Yes, really excited to have some people with you this evening to share with you some of what's going on at specifically, again, at the middle school. But I want to start by saying that this presentation is in response to a letter that you received from a middle school student last month regarding his thoughts on wellness and the need for students to take mental health days, just as they take days for other illnesses. And I shared with you that I'd be happy to share with you some of the efforts underway at the middle school, both to support student wellness, but also want you to know that our attendance policy, and I mentioned this last time as well, our attendance policy doesn't preclude students from taking a day off for any kind of illness. In fact, we follow the statutory requirements of the state, which allows students 10 days off with parent permission. And it's only after those 10 days that we begin to ask questions about their absences. And certainly, if a student had a need for a mental health day and parent permission, we certainly wouldn't stand in the way of a student taking that time. So policy-wise, we certainly allow for mental health days, but we also are doing an awful lot at the middle school in an effort to keep all students well. And that's what you're going to hear about this evening. So I'd like to introduce Candace Morell, and we have counselors Eileen Melody and Christina Lee with us as well. And Candace, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly. So thank you very much for having us this evening. We are really pleased to be here to share a bit about what we do at MMS to support students in being well, feeling well, and doing well. We thought we'd first take you a walk through a typical day at MMS, and so that you have the opportunity to develop an understanding of the different touch points that exist within the school day. Each day, we have changed our structures this year, so that upon arrival to school, there are adults out on the front sidewalks where parents are dropping off students, greeting students, checking in with them, as well as we have 2 certified staff members down at the bus lot greeting students as they get off the bus. Some of that was simply put in, as a structural need for the way we came back to school this year. But there are the unintended benefits that we've really gained from this. Teachers checking in, noticing things when students come in during the day, in the morning, going out of their way to help a student. I'll use a brief example. A student came walking up the driveway to school about 2 months ago. Bike chain had fallen off his bike. A teacher on morning duty noticed, went and talked to another teacher who they knew could fix the bike chain. And by the end of the day, the student had a new bike chain and a variety of other things because we could make it work. That's just a simple example of how these touch points first thing in the morning, our adults in the building are checking in with students as they come in, whether it's the main entrance, saying a good morning, getting to know, and really looking out for them. Additionally, students then come in from their day, they go into homeroom. That's a time where they're getting settled in. Teachers are checking in with them, making sure that they've got what they need and set up for success for the day. And then additionally, throughout the day, our counselors, Christina and Eileen, will check in with students. Often it's a follow-up to something that they'd worked with a student on, and again, setting them up for check-in. All of these touch points within the day, we would call what I call tier 1 in our tiers of intentionality and outreach to students. As we move throughout the day, other times of day that we're able to really connect with kids and build relationships. One area is mass breaks. Prior to this year, we never had mass breaks, but this year when we go out for that 5 to 7 minute break several times a day, it allows teachers to go out with their cohort of students, their classes, to have conversations, to check in. It allows that breathing space that we've really found of benefit to really get to know our students. Additionally, Christina, Eileen, I'm going to leave this up to you to talk about lunch and lunch groups.
Jump in about lunch groups. So in a typical year, Eileen and I will both have lunch groups in our offices offered to any student who wants to join us. This year, it has been a little different. At the beginning of the year, kept telling students to bear with me. I had a feeling what we were going to do was going to be changing pretty regularly. So I've been fortunate that I hold remote lunch groups 2 days a week for our remote students. I have a Google Classroom, so I post how they can access me. And we usually play Kahoot or some other fun quiz games. And it's been a really great way, especially for me as the 5th and 6th grade counselor, to get to know 5th graders that haven't come into our building yet. And then the other 3 days I offer in-person lunch groups for my 5th and 6th graders who are in person. And I know Eileen does the same with 7th and 8th grade. And that's just been a nice way for kids to connect with each other, to connect with me, just to have that downtime. And so we're very fortunate in this time of COVID that we can even be able to offer those things.
Thank you, Christina. Additionally, we have a 25-minute activity break this year. As you know, our building structure changed a little bit this year as a result of some of the requirements that we needed to adhere to as a result of COVID. And we lost something in X block. But we have activity break, which allows students some downtime to get outside, to get some fresh air. And we found that kids have really appreciated that we've been mindful to provide that break within the day for them this year. And they found it an opportunity for them to connect with adults, to connect with their friends, but just to step back and breathe. Another touch point within the day is this year we have implemented the second step social emotional learning curriculum in grades 5 through 8. We are actually using the online platform that they offer. It has been very beneficial as what I call the platform from which teachers can begin to plan discussions and focus and work for the week on all things social emotional learning. It's really provided that structure which allows us to begin to open the conversations on a variety of topics that then extend throughout the week. Students receive 25 minutes of social emotional learning 4 times a week. And another area that we've really looked at as an important touch point in a typical day is physical activity. And these examples of what you're seeing is our PE staff have done a lot of work this year in really developing those lifetime fitness skills and activities for students, and whether it's backyard games, or in this case, all grades are currently involved in a personal fitness unit this week and the next couple of weeks. They have stations set up throughout the gym where they're able to participate in a variety of fitness activities. For us staff who have stopped in and popped through, it's been fun as well for us to work out with them, and again, to just foster those connections and conversations. So we call that tier 1 of knowing our people. And it's really important for us in the work that we do. We feel we're very unique in that we put a lot of energy and effort and time into that personalized outreach. We recognize the importance and value of building relationships, and all that we do, really feeling that it's important that it's grounded in empathy and understanding. And often our motto in all that we do with our students is seek to understand first, understand where they're coming from, what their needs might be, so that we can then develop a support plan. So our touch points that we talked about today really allow us to build those relationships and connections that are so important. Because we recognize the next things that we do in our tier 2 and tier 3 of intentionality really is built on that relationship and a pattern of noticings. So when we talk about how do we know when students need a more personalized touch or connection with a school counselor or some other support service within the building, it really begins with a series or pattern of noticings that might happen when a teacher notices that perhaps their behaviors, the students' behaviors changed, or the academics have slipped, and the teacher might initially check in with the child. If that pattern builds over time and there becomes, more noticings of things that don't seem to be working for the child, we then bring them to kid meeting and have conversations. But we're really a building where it's all eyes on, looking at our students, getting to know them, and then thinking about what next steps and needs that they have. Eileen, do you want to jump in?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important, as Candace said, is that we are doing a lot of observing at that tier 1, and at the tier 2, at the kid meetings, we're actually doing more collaboration. So this is where the identification of what is the next step that we need to do to help support the student. So together we make a plan. We decide, okay, what is the target behavior that we're going to look towards? So it might be an academic, it might be work completion that we're trying to hone in on. It could be something more behavioral. It could be, let's see if the child will come in a more cooperative manner. So our kid meetings are our next step in that. And then in addition, we have a CARES team that meets to take it to another level, which is where we begin to reach out to some of our community resources and families directly. So that is our sort of our tier support system that we have in place.
So Christina, would you speak to kid meeting?
Right. So kid meetings, we meet weekly, and that is where support service staff, Eileen, myself, and maybe academic support teachers or special education teachers, along with the grade level teachers, will review some of the patterns that we've been noticing. Say Johnny has been not really completing his work, and he's now starting to show a pattern of just different mood swings or something like that that we hadn't seen before. We will all collaborate and come up with action steps on, you know, who's going to check in with the student, who might reach out to the parents. We'll set like another time, like, all right, let's, you know, do these steps and then move to, you know, let's check back in a week and see if he's doing any better, see what we found out. And then, as Eileen was saying, as it gets, if we are finding that there is something bigger, we're finding out from the family that they need support, that, you know, maybe there's like a loss of job or food insecurity, that's then when, you know, we'll come together. And I'm starting to, I think, step into the next slide about the CARES team. That's when we might, you know, reach out to youth services, if the student might need a higher level of counseling. If they're in attendance, if attendance has been an issue, we'll reach out to them as well. You know, we'll try to set them up with Kathy Ann Eastley and social services. So those are just some of the outreach programs that we'll reach out to when a family needs help. But it starts at the kid meetings of just us knowing our students and recognizing like something's just not right.
So what we'll say is that in the work that we do, there's a tremendous amount of personalization that's placed in really working with the child individually, collaborating with the teaching team for those supports, and for supports that are beyond just the academic, really looking at how we work with the family, support their needs, develop an understanding of what additional resources they might need, whether it's an opportunity for their child to have counseling through the Youth Services Bureau or some outside agency. I will say that Christina and Eileen are exemplary in the work that they do daily to outreach to families, to offer support, to help students succeed. Christina is now going to take a moment to talk through our process to support new and returning students to MMS, because this really is an element of getting to know our students, getting them to feel safe, secure, connected, so that they can have a joyful and successful experience at school.
Yes, so this year's also been very unique. In a typical year, we often will have new students who move into district throughout the school year. This year, what's been very interesting is then we've had families, as Kelly had said, coming out of remote and returning to in-person learning. So it's been a funny balance of new families who are absolutely new to Mansfield, and then welcoming back the students that we might already know. So if it's a new family new to the district, we, you know, set up a time to talk. We'll set up a Zoom meeting and meet with the student and the parent and just talk about all of the opportunities that they'll have at the middle school, answer any questions or concerns they might have, especially during this time of COVID. And that's pretty typical too of a new family, COVID or not. And then our remote families that are returning will reach out to the parent and talk to them about what the schedule looks like, talk about how we've cohorted the students and how they follow the same groups of students throughout the day, how we have mask breaks and the activity break, just to help ease some of their concerns about sending their child back to school. We always have the student meet us just in the office on their first day. So then we get them settled and we take them to their homeroom. We go over their schedule. One of the 6th grade teachers had made a great point earlier in the year. In the past, Eileen and I will typically set a student up with another student to shadow for the day. But the way that we've had to cohort the students, now they're shadowing their entire class. And I think that that's actually been really great. I just this week had a student who started new, and the teacher had kind of set up point people, but the entire homeroom came together, made the student feel really welcomed. And after like 3 days, we've all forgotten that she literally just started on Monday because they've just been so wonderful.
So another thing that I'd like to thank you, Christina, another high point that I'd like to point out to all of you is our school counselors. Not only are they working with their students in person, but they're also available to them virtually through their virtual classrooms. So Eileen, do you want to talk a little bit about the virtual classrooms?
Sure. This came out of school counselors throughout Connecticut have been reaching out to students in this way. And so Christina and I kind of put our heads together with the help of our paraeducator to create these rooms where students can explore, or as Christina's place, Christina's classroom really seeks some calming space. But I try for the upper grades is to post information about transitioning to high school. There's a whole Padlet on high school opportunities. A little panther there on the shelf if you click on the panther, you'll get all information about E.O. Smith. But in addition to those kind of informational things, there are also some calming and some games and some fun places. If you click on my Bitmoji, I welcome you to my virtual room. My partner on the other side there is my intern, so they get to meet her as well. So it's kind of a fun thing that we did this year to, be relevant to the kids. This is the way they are seeing their world is in these images, and they think we're kind of cool because we have Bitmojis now. So it's fun.
And Eileen's going to speak to Recharge Day. So this is something that was just absolutely brilliant that happened yesterday for 8th grade students and all 7th and 8th grade remote learners.
It was just really a wonderful day. It came out of the success we had after College and Career Readiness Day, where we did a fully Zoom College and Career Readiness Day the day before Thanksgiving. And it worked so well. I went to Candace the next day and said, oh gosh, kids are saying to me that, they're not doing anything. They don't have any activities. They're kind of down. So what if we did something using that same format for this kind of this theme of recharging yourself? So we set this day back in December. We got some school counseling grad students, some family members to chime in, some other community members. Our community is quite large now, which was neat. And our students were plugged into 3 separate activities. From, as you can see, some of the things here, they learned about animal rescue and how to get involved in that. They visited through a South Carolina aquarium with one of our teachers' parents. They learned all about taking care of plants and watercoloring and woodworking and crafting, photography, golfing. There were 20 different activities that they were able to sign up for. And we did get some feedback from our remote students. It was awesome. They were really, they filled out a survey from Mr. Buck had given them, and it was just so positive that I feel like we touched on something that was really important. They're like, we should do this every year. So the idea is for them now to take the seeds that have been planted in their minds and get active and do something to bring themselves out of this sort of isolation that many of them, isolation in some cases, despair also. So really to uplift them and to basically recharge them. So I felt it was an excellent way and felt a lot of success. It was great.
Yeah, and Eileen, it really was fantastic. I should note that there were many presenters that were former retired Mansfield Middle School teachers. Father of one of our teachers, Eileen, I think your brother was a presenter. So Eileen is very resourceful in this work, and students really did enjoy it. It was a nice way for them all to connect. We also will share just a little bit at the end here that we really believe in providing opportunities to build connections and pursue interests for all of our students. And one of the things that we hadn't been able to do a lot of this year were those all school events that build common shared experiences that allow opportunity for everybody to be a part of something and have some in that shared experience. So Kelly mentioned at the beginning, Linda Robinson and I have been talking about what's something that we could do. And Linda, if you ask the question and you get her thinking, she will build it. She will come up with the idea and generate it. So we did have the Goodbye Winter Spring into New Ideas this past week that students and staff alike have really enjoyed. And one of the things that we really noticed was even not only were classes coming down to enjoy this together, remote learners on Monday night as we were there deploying Chromebooks for 5th grade students, but also our staff took time to come down in teaching teams to really walk through this experience yesterday, Wednesday as well. And it's been a really community building experience that we're appreciative of. And I know how much work it took to set that up. Our student council is back, and we were so pleased that they just recently organized a spirit week with daily themes, and we had incredible participation from remote learners and in person. And our 7th grade students designed a community Kahoot. A Kahoot is a trivia game where they develop the questions. You run it through a platform, and then students can use their electronic devices to answer questions and be a part of that. And so all of the kids, Kahoot is all the rage anyways these days, but they love this one generated by their friends and their peers. And lastly, Kelly mentioned, we are extremely pleased to be offering after-school activities and that will start in 3 weeks. We just deployed our first ever virtual student activities brochure. It includes a Google form with students can sign up for an after-school activity. We have quite a wide variety of opportunities offered this quarter. We're so thrilled. We are feeling very light and optimistic this week because I think this is the first point in the year where we felt like, okay, we're back at it. We have things to look forward to that involve kids getting engaged in activities and clubs and sports. And we're really looking forward to having all of our 8th graders return on the 29th. So,
Candace, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
It's Catherine Paulus. Do you have a limit with the virtual compared to what you have with in person?
I'm not clear what you mean, Catherine. A limit to the number who can participate?
Correct.
Right. Most of the after-school activities, there are some that are virtual, but most of these are going to be in-person activities.
So the virtual, they'll be able to have more students participate?
In most cases, yes, they can have more students participate, but the in-person still have size limits.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Thank you.
So that concludes what we have to share about the ways that we seek to support our MMS students around all things wellness.
So I'd like to say the beginning of your presentation talking about looking at the whole child and keeping eyes on the child and everybody looking at every aspect, not just how they're doing in a classroom, is just, it's so heartening. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you enough for that, and making a connection with the community, because it really does take a village to greatly appreciate that. And then on top of it, all this other wonderful, innovative stuff.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Kathy, can I just pile on also the appreciation? Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really helpful to hear the whole comprehensive amount of stuff that you're working on. Because I love this stuff. Like I also think the systems that you have in place, I really appreciate that you described some of the teams that you're working in to really make sure that you're taking a look at everybody and looking at everyone's, whether it's attendance or academics or, behavioral supports or social emotional needs, that you're kind of doing that regular work. Has that increased from, I know you guys had some of those structures before, but has that increased this year? Yeah.
So Eileen, if you want to jump in, but I would say the structures are there and we may have enhanced structures, but certainly I think the needs have increased this year.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
The amount of check-ins that we're doing, individual check-ins with students, the number of phone calls that we're making to families has increased quite a bit. It's very good though. I mean, I feel like when I pick up the phone and I call a family, I know that family, and so that's where that, as Candace was talking about, and Christina, that seek to understand. We really do know our people and can help because we have that whole child in mind, that whole family in mind. I do really think we support our kids quite well and their families.
To add to that, yesterday I presented to the remote fourth graders like a career exploration thing, but then they really wanted to know about MMS. And they were amazed at, they were like, all of your students? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I'm supposed to. And then one of them had asked something about well, how do you help the students? What do you do? And I'm like, you guys just want to be heard. You just want to talk to somebody. You want to share what you're feeling, how you're thinking, and you just want to be heard. I'm like, that's really what it comes down to. And they were like, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for making those opportunities and increasing the adult support by you guys and everyone at the school. That's just tremendous. I know the need is much more intense this year than typical, which is, you guys always do a wonderful job. But thank you also for, again, describing some of those systems to help support all the great interventions that you're doing. So thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to jump in also. I think that a lot of what we've heard come out of education this year is how many of these things we've done because of the pandemic should really stay, right? So I love your idea of doing the little Bitmoji classrooms to let kids explore that on their own and to have that space where they can kind of digest what they need to. I think that would be a great thing to keep. And I just want to applaud you for the recharge day. And I think that's something that should be, that you think about keeping long term. But I know it's such an odd thing, but of course, all good teachers are still incorporating fun into their lessons, but it's work this year to think about that as a layer. So I really just appreciate your emphasis on putting a day where everyone's focus is just on that, and it just kind of eliminates some of the other stress. So I think that was really, really a great thing to see.
Anyone else? Martha? You're on mute, Martha.
No, we can't hear.
Sorry. Anyone else? Well, again, thank you very, very, very much, all of you. Appreciate it.
Kathy, I'll just say that I sent all of you the slides, and I would encourage you to go to that slide that has the virtual office on it and click on the links that are on that slide. Every image that you see on that slide takes you to an activity, and it's really fun. I had such a good time. It's really fun playing around in the virtual office. So congratulations, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to assessment practices.
Yeah, we have several reports to share with you this evening, and I will try to make my way through this one as efficiently as I can. I need to first click through all of the slides you just saw. But one of the other things that you have asked about is how we're monitoring the students who are not in school every day, especially when it comes to their academic performance. And you've asked questions about, are we still providing students with the same types of assessments, and do we know where the students are? Are we sure that they're getting the right learning that they need? So I want to share a little bit with you about what assessment looks like this year. And Peter Dart from Goodwin School and Candace Morell from the middle school are going to help me with this. I just want to start by saying that we have not abandoned any of our assessments. So we are still using state assessments as far as we know. We will be giving Smarter Balanced Assessment in May. We are still using our local assessments, the normed assessments, meaning an assessment that allows us to compare our students' performance to others around the country. Now, that happens to be the STAR assessment. We have all kinds of literacy assessments, reading inventories. I just gave an example of one of them here. You may hear people talk about the benchmark assessment or the Fountas and Pinnell. That's an assessment that we really rely on to support our readers up through about 6th grade. And in other types of assessments, we do a lot with local assessments. End of unit assessments, some that are common that everybody gives, like our math assessments, or perhaps science unit assessments, which are developed by a team of teachers. In addition, we also monitor students all the time during the learning process through a strategy that we call formative assessments. And it's something that I've spoken with you about before, but I wanted to give you a quick example of what that looks like. Each teacher receives at the start of the year an assessment calendar. This happens to be the mathematics assessment calendar. And you can see month by month, and down the side here, grade by grade, the math assessments that are expected to be given as a way of benchmarking. So this is a local assessment that's been developed to help us monitor the performance of students. These initials here refer to certain standards within the math curriculum. And we also provide the teacher with a benchmark score. In other words, a standard score that we hope all students will achieve. That's a really simple example of one of our assessment strategies. But in addition,
Ellie, I just wanted to interrupt. You can't see the links.
Okay. You know, I tested this before and I just noticed that it's working differently this time. So let me try this again. Do you see it that time? Probably not, because I don't see my icon anymore. Let's see. There, you can see it this time?
Yes.
Okay, so this was what I was just describing about the math assessment. So the benchmark scores, grade by grade, the months that assessments are given, and the score that we seek. But when it comes to literacy, where it's a little more complex, we're looking for, oh geez, lost you again. This is a little bit awkward sometimes with Zoom, and I haven't quite figured out. I need to talk to one of those teachers that does this all day long. Okay. So for literacy, teachers receive a much more detailed assessment plan. and I believe you can see this. In this assessment plan, there are multiple assessments provided, again, with an expectation of when those assessments are given, and then some score values. In this case, the numbers 1 through 4 describe the level of performance. So 4 being exceeding standard, 3 being at standard. And month by month, what students' performance should be on each of these assessments to ensure that students by the end of the grade meet the expectations that we have for that grade level. So it's very, very detailed in the area of literacy. There's something else that I want you to see, because this year we've had to do some things differently. And we've had to ensure that our students were receiving the most focused instruction that we could provide them. And we did that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm playing with two things here. We did that by identifying our priority standards for the year. And because I talked about that formative assessment, one of the things that we want our staff to do is to assess while they're instructing, so that they can identify where students currently are performing and provide the right supports to move students to the next level of performance. In order to assess in that manner, teachers need to have a very good understanding of the skills that are to be developed. So this is, sorry for going so quickly, but this is, you can see our district map of priority outcomes. And again, this was developed this year to address the concerns that some people had about how students were managing without having been in school and having to learn remotely last spring. And also, as I said, making sure we're using our time as efficiently as we could this year. So the beginning of this document defines all of the skills in literacy. But then for each grade and in clusters of months, we identify the instructional unit that's to be used. And I think I'm probably going to lose you again, but if I click on any one of these, do you see that?
Yes.
Great. So if I click on any one of these, what I get are some questions that the teacher can use when she speaks with a student about the student's reading. And, oops, let me do that again. And also the skill structure, or the progression of skills that she's looking for in the student response. This tool is really critical because it allows our teachers to provide that just-in-time support to students while they're learning. It's a combination of assessing and teaching at the same time, and we've developed a tremendous number of materials to support teachers to do that. So we have a lot of strategies to continue to assess students, and it's being done both for students that are in person and for students who are remote. And there are a couple of specific strategies occurring at the middle school and at Goodwin that I've asked Candace and Peter to share with you. And so I'll bring back up those slides so that you can do that. So Candace, go ahead.
Great. So, yeah, as Kelly had said, we've built in a new structure this year to work with our 8th grade students, helping them in facilitating goal-setting conferences with our 8th graders. So we recognize that middle school is an important time for students to become consciously aware of and intentional about the choices that they make in their lives. So thinking about how they spend their time. What are they doing to continue to contribute to their family, their school, their community, and the intentionality with which they care for themselves. And so one of the ways that we've engaged with them this year is through what we call goal-setting conferences. The focus of the student goal-setting conference is teaching students to read data, helping them to create short-term goals, and then providing an opportunity and a revisit where we monitor their performance and their progress toward their goals. We recognize that goal setting is really helpful in visualizing pathways to success for them. Kelly, you can advance to the next slide. So when we think about goal setting conferences, our purpose, really helping students, raising their consciousness and fostering engagement, essentially helping to place students in the driver's seat of their learning. This process, we used several artifacts intentionally to conduct a mid-year performance review. The STAR platform is our benchmark assessment platform for reading and math. So what we pulled from there were student growth scores for both reading and mathematics. Additionally, we took their report card as another artifact and data point to have conversation about. And at this point in the year, we have made high school recommendations for all of our 8th grade students. So the student portfolio includes those data points. The structure we have built into the time period, we've got enough staff that we can have conferences with every student and accomplish this in essentially 2 meeting periods. The conference itself allows opportunity for dialogue and discourse. The conferencee and the adult facilitating the conference review progress to date. And really the goal is to engage the student in conversation about where they're at and where they want to be. In this photo here, you see a teacher looking at the STAR benchmark growth scores, having a conversation about their performance compared to the last time they took this assessment. Probing questions of the student around where they think they should be, taking a look at report card progress marks and having conversations about, we noticed that you've increased in performance in this particular class, but not that one. Why or why not? Why do you think that is? The questions and the dialogue and the observing and the noticing allow us to foster and engage in a conversation with students where they're beginning to understand where they're at academically and holistically, and begin to think about what are the next steps for them. As part of the process, we have conversations about what do you need from us, what additional supports, and that's where we call it really the personalization. Listening to them think about where they're at based on what they've heard in the conversation that they've had based on the questions and discourse, and then helping them to begin to identify what are the next steps. And then we look at establishing goals, and these are student generated. What's a goal that you'd like to set for yourself that we might revisit in the next 6 weeks? So in one example of a conference we had this week, the student acknowledged that they weren't putting as much time into reading as they were into video games. And so the challenge then became, for every minute you spend on a video game, put a minute of reading in your bucket. And try it for a week. And then we're actually revisiting it with the student next Monday and see how that goes, because they recognize that maybe their priorities of where they're spending their time needed to be adjusted. And we said, don't do it for 6 weeks. Let's do it for a week and let's have a conversation. What do you notice? Are you willing to do that? And the student was like, yeah, I'm willing to try it. So it's just, again, this goes back to the previous presentation, really getting to know our students, having that conversation, engaging them in the dialogue. And then after we've established those goals, we set a time period by which we're going to come back and review those goals and evaluate progress. We think this is really important for our 8th grade students. They're getting ready to go to high school. They really should be in the driver's seat of their learning and really taking more ownership of it. And we thought they were ready for this process. And we've begun the conferences this week. We're going to continue next week, but we've really had positive experience with the students thus far. This is new to us this year, but I think based on our experience so far, it's something we're going to keep.
Good evening, board members. And Candace, that's so exciting to see that work. Goodwin has continued in that same vein. In the past couple of years, we've really tried to lean in on this idea of knowing all of our students by name, talent, and need. And as Kelly was talking about, assessment is continuous, it's ongoing. And what's important is what we do with this assessment information. But what's really critical, and what I think is most authentic, is what Candace is talking about, is when we get our students talking about their understanding of their learning. That is so important. And what is so great, and I'm glad Kelly showed you some of our curriculum documents, is that we have a curriculum framework that helps us articulate learning targets and I can statements and learning progressions that are student friendly. And so in these pictures, you see some artifacts that help students articulate, put into kid-friendly words that are used in assessments, because assessment really needs to be what happens in the classroom. It needs to be authentic to match those tasks. And when we have our students talking about what they've learned, what they can do, we get a better sense of their understanding and their ability to articulate concepts and if they are ready to move or advance along the learning progression. The artifact that you see on the right side is a scaffold piece that we use with fourth grade students on inferring about characters. And at the top is the learning progression that teachers would look at to assess and to think about instructionally where the student is in their understanding about inferring about characters. And the column to the right of that would be their next step. That would be their growth. And this particular document is given to the student to start to think about what is their goal and what is their evidence that they've achieved that goal, so that they're using language from the learning progressions, they're using I can statements, and they're thinking about their classroom work. Super powerful, because that's the assessment. Really, when you think about a student-centered approach to instruction, it helps us better understand from a child's perspective what they understand about that learning target and what they're ready for. At Goodwin, we've worked on this concept of family conferences. In fact, I've talked to you about that before. In a family conference, we invite the student to be a member of that and to be able to share their goals and their evidence of that work. So again, I think of eighth graders doing that and knowing that we're planting the seeds and skills in order to think about their learning, their progress, their relationship with the tasks that we give them, and the feedback that we give them. So super powerful. And again, it's the curriculum design that allows us to really think about being very intentional and explicit so that students can see themselves and articulate and use that same language. Kelly, we'll go to the next slide. So how do we use this assessment data? And I just wanted to share that, one of the most basic but most important is just consistently being in classrooms. And that's both for remote and in person. That administrators are visiting our remote classrooms, we're visiting our in-person classrooms. And when we go into classrooms, we're always talking to our students. We're looking down, not up. We're looking at what kids are working on and talking to kids about their understanding. This is just like one of the greatest moves, because it helps us listen for, it helps us understand whether the child has internalized the learning target, if they're using some of the I can language, and understand what it is they're being asked to do. Those observations coupled with teacher talk afterwards are just priceless. That again is that informal, ongoing assessment. But we do have some of the more formal assessments like the benchmark, and Candace talked about STAR. We have the reading assessments. And so periodically through the year, we do something called a kid talk. It's where we pause formally and we look at our formal data points. And we know it's never just one data point. It's a multitude of light that create this constellation of understanding. And so from all these data points, or points of light, rather, we get a better understanding of where our kids are. And in those Kid Talk, really every stone is turned over. We're looking at everything. But we do know some kids need additional support. And so from these periodic Kid Talk, we then talk about intervention plans. So it helps us build the multi-tiered supports where we're thinking about how do we close a gap in understanding, learning, and conceptual understanding, and how do we do that quickly in a short period of time. So Kid Talk becomes a critical kind of cultural thing in our building where we know that we're going to have time to sit down and just talk about kids, talk about what we know about kids, where we see them going, and what they might need. And then finally, again, I'm going to connect to the middle school team. And Candace, please share with your team the wellness presentation was truly inspiring. We continue at the elementary level to do many of the same things. And one of the things that we've held on to is this notion of a care team, that we holistically look at the child in terms of what they need for wellness. But it touches an assessment because assessment is not only just academic data, it's attendance, it's participation, it's engagement, it's the connection of the child to an adult, it's their attitude and disposition to peers. And so we know that our work this year has been critical with the care team to make sure that it's not just about assessing academics, but taking that holistic approach and thinking about the wellness of the child, wellness of the family, and working as a team to best support and put in supports for the student. I'm just going to talk a little bit about these pictures because I love them. The one on the right was taken today. We had a third grade classroom doing a STEM activity. They had been talking about what's happening in Hawaii and questions about erosion. And so they were trying to design a structure that would prevent erosion. And it was one of those classic hands-on activities. But what was so impressive was not only in this kind of COVID safety protocol world, the amount of conversations that were happening with kids, generating ideas and understandings was just tremendous. So to me, that's a priceless moment where I'm capturing information and it's assessment, right? That I'll have to talk to the teacher and that will lean in on this experience in terms of what's next. What did you learn about your kids and where you're going with that? The one in the middle is also one of those pictures that I think I'll keep forever because students in a fourth grade classroom are working on a collaborative project. And the laptop has a student who's in remote and a student who is sitting further across the room who felt more comfortable with more distance. And so you see the laptop with Zoom connecting with remote students. You see students collaborating on a task. And again, it's that student work that creates an artifact that's aligned to those I can statements, aligned to the learning progressions, and help us better understand the bigger context of the assessments. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter and Candace. And, you know, we could do a whole workshop for you on assessment, but I wanted you to see how we're managing to keep our practices going, even in this environment, and certainly connecting with our remote learners as well.
Edith?
I just want to say I really enjoyed this presentation. It was great. I love the feedback loop where the kids are participating. I feel like it really empowers them. And Candace, you mentioned the short-term goals, like let's try this for a week. And I think that is so real life as opposed to here, let's do it for 6 weeks and we'll talk to you later. I think it's excellent. Thank you.
David? You're on mute.
Speaking, am I? I have to follow, yes. The 1 week strategy is the type of thing I think we're expected in setting some long-term for this. And I think the program of wellness and caring are very good, and I'm glad the school system is doing it. However, do you get enough time for all the students that really need it? Peter or Candace?
Yeah, I think there we find the time, we make the time. We also you know, it's not one person doing this, it's a team effort, and so sometimes we are networking and you know, while you know, a school counselor may be reaching out to one child, it might be Larry or myself, it might be a school nurse. It's a team effort to do this work, and some days are busy. But we're able to do it.
Agreed. And what we've realized is actually wellness activities increase productivity. And so talk about a practice that we may hold on to, mask breaks. Well, hopefully we won't need mask breaks in the future, but this idea of a kinesthetic movement break has really been useful to engage our kids, and the productivity after those breaks has been really remarkable.
Thank you.
To me is that we had a presentation on the wellness assessment, and they really all wrap into each other. It's incredible that both of them go hand in hand.
Yeah, Peter, I was going to say something similar about keeping a sentiment like that, but I think both of you expressed that there's kind of not a focus on trying to change a bad habit, but improve good habits. And I think that's the sentiment that you share with keeping that as something for the district as well, right? Like we need to keep that momentum going. Like, how do we continue to give kids the opportunities to work toward being a better self, and all of us as well? Like it is really beneficial to get out of your space and to have a different mindset for a short amount of time for productivity and wellness and all that. So I support keeping things like that as well.
I know Martha's having trouble with her audio tonight, so I'll share with you all a comment that she made after the wellness presentation, which I think connects here too. And she says, a common thread in the past few weeks has included comments regarding communicating with parents. I'm under the impression that we have a much better line of communication with all of our parents. And I would say that extends into the ways in which we're communicating student performance as well.
I'll just say, just to chime in, I love the idea of, for all kids, sharing their data with them and really helping them become good, or, you know, developing those skills of self-monitoring and self-management, larger skills of self-management and taking charge of their own learning, setting their own goals is really wonderful. So thank you very much.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Yeah, Catherine here. I know that several years ago they tried to bring Brain Gym into the middle school. That might be something to revisit. We have two teachers there who are trained in it.
So Catherine, they're not the only two teachers trained in it, and actually there are teachers that utilize some elements of Brain Gym as part of their daily routines. We just had this conversation with 5th grade as a team as a whole today. So while we may not be sending kids up to a particular room, there are practices that we're absolutely utilizing across the building.
I thought originally the Brain Gym was supposed to be done in each classroom, like for the first 5 minutes of class, and that kind of fizzled. And I'm talking several years ago.
Yeah, there are a variety of strategies that we utilize. Brain Gym is one strategy that we utilize, but they're part of a suite of strategies that we use with kids, and they're an element of what we do within homeroom times and within different class structures. So they're not completely obsolete or non-existent, but it isn't that we have them established that at 8 a.m. every day, everybody in the building's doing Brain Gym. Their teachers are looking at how they weave that in where it's appropriate and needed and beneficial.
Well, that's the way Brain Gym is supposed to work, Candace.
Anyone else? Well, again, thank you very much, Candace and Peter. Greatly appreciate it. Good stuff, really good stuff. Next, we go on to grant funds to address pandemic operations.
Okay, and I think I shared with some of you as we were coming on that Charmaine intended to be here this evening to talk with you all about this, but she is not feeling well and texted me before the meeting saying she was going to try to make it, but I don't see her yet. So I'm happy to share and talk a little bit about a report that was included in your packet, and I have a few slides that I can put up to sort of help us structure the conversation as well. So let me pull those back up. So there were some questions at the last meeting regarding the funds that we've received to support COVID. So I want to talk you through our process for identifying expenses this year that are related to schooling in the pandemic, and then describe with you the funds that have been made available to date and how we've used those. So in your packet, you have a long list of the items that we've identified as necessary to support schooling during the pandemic. And thankfully, we started identifying expenses in March. Under Sherry Trahan, when she was here, she immediately set up an accounting system so that we could keep good track of everything that we purchased that we had not intended to purchase until COVID hit. And she also knew that because a state of emergency had been declared, that there would be some funds made available to us even before there were any bills that were brought to Congress to provide additional funding. So we were well set up, and in fact, Congress, if you'll recall, last spring did come out with a COVID relief bill. A portion of that was called the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. The acronym we use is ESSER, and there have since been subsequent relief funds for schools. And so the bill that was passed last spring is known as ESSER 1, and at the time, Mansfield received $90,000, just over $90,000. And again, because we had already done a good job of identifying expenses, we had no trouble finding $90,000 worth of expenses. In fact, we were able to cover up till that point nearly all the expenses for technology and nearly all of the expenses for additional instructional supplies, but not quite all of the expenses for cleaning and sanitizing materials, because we began buying those in the spring and continued to buy them through the summer. But you'll see we found ways to cover additional costs later. So first $90,000 went primarily to these categories. Then in December, Congress passed a second coronavirus relief bill, this time known as for schools, the ESSER 2 funds. This was the amount of money, just over $400,000, that I shared with you during the budget development process. We were not given the details on how these funds could be used until late January, but we do know that unlike the ESSER 1 funds, which were for expenses, ESSER 1 funds also were for expenses throughout the school year, but the ESSER 2 funds were expenses that began in January, where the ESSER 1 funds were expenses that began last March. So we know that we can pick up coverage for some of the other cleaning and sanitizing equipment from now through the end of the school year and even into next year. And as you'll recall, we have set aside some of the additional personnel that was originally proposed in the superintendent's budget to be covered through the ESSER 2 funds. And we need to have an application ready for the state. Although these are federal funds, they flow through the state. So we need to have an application for how we're going to spend this $400,000 ready by the third week of April. We have a wide range with how these funds can be used, which is very nice. And before we complete our application, we also have to go through a comprehensive needs assessment, which we're in the process of doing now. When these federal funds were made available to the state, especially the ESSER 1 funds, there were some set-aside funds given to the state to be used for education, not directly to districts, but on a statewide level. Connecticut chose to allocate much of that money to individual districts in two ways. They provided some funding along with some corporate giving funding that they had to ensure that they had one-to-one computing for every student. Mansfield received about 80 Chromebooks and somewhere between 5 and 10 hotspots or devices, connectivity devices for families through the state, through these coronavirus relief funds that they had. Again, this all comes from that first pot of money that was approved by Congress last March. This money all had to be spent by December 31st of 2020. So along with the devices, the state also asked us in July to estimate other expenses. And I sent in an estimate of, I think it was close to $400,000 of possible expenses. They awarded us, oh, I'm sorry, I put the wrong number in here. It was $99,000. You received a corrected copy, and that's just completely my fault. I forgot to change the slide. There was a change actually in the amount that they awarded us, and the first value was 107, and the updated report was 99,000. So they awarded us about 99,000, just over $99,000. But it came with stipulations. It could not be used for instructional personnel. It could only be used for personnel to support cleaning or transportation. So you can see here that a large amount of our funding, $85,000, went to cleaning and safety supplies, a lot of it hardware, because remember, you'll see on that list, we changed out our faucets to automatic faucets where we could. We changed our toilets to automatic flush toilets. We had touchless soap dispensers and so on. We bought a lot of plexiglass, one-time expenses, thankfully. And thankfully, we were able to cover them all through this additional state money that was provided to us. And finally, through the state funds, they also made monies available to municipalities. The municipalities were told in December that if the town operations themselves did not need to use all of the funds allotted, that they could use some of those funds also to support schools. And so we still are looking to cover such things as custodial overtime and some additional cleaning supplies, not the hardware, but some of the additional solutions that we've purchased, and the need to continue to buy masks, for example, beyond our original allocations. So we're still working on this with the finance office, but if we cannot make up the additional overtime costs through this grant source, we now know that we have additional funds in ESSER 2 that we can use for custodial overtime. And although I have not had a chance to see the news this evening, I believe that a third round of funding was passed by Congress today. And we know that that will be the largest pot of money that we've received to date. So I have no doubt that we will be able to recover these additional costs through grant funds. So let me stop there, and I see one question in the chat. Martha's having trouble loading.
And Dave?
Do you have any estimate from today's bill signing? Any idea what we might get and what we can use it for?
What we can use it for will probably be very similar to ESSER 2, which is very open, meaning we can use it for instruction, we can use it for technology, we can use it for cleaning, health and safety, family engagement, all of those things. It's very broad. And yes, I do have an estimate. You guys ready? Right now, the funds can be used for from now through the next 2 full school years, which is really good because we're going to want to spread this out for things like summer school programming, additional supports during the school year, and so on. Right now, we're looking at over $900,000. That's the early indications for Mansfield Public Schools. It's a lot of money, and it's money that's going to need to be spent very thoughtfully, because it's also money that goes away. So I shared with somebody, if we wanted to reduce class size to 10 students per class, for example, I don't think we would, but if we wanted to do that, we'd have to remember in 2 years that money goes away. So either we make a commitment to continue to fund those positions, or we have a plan for how to move away from that at some point. So we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what we do with that amount of money. I'm sorry, Martha, we still can't hear you. I don't know what's up, but feel free to put it in the chat and I'll read it.
So Kelly, will you work with Charmaine to strategize how to spend that money going forward?
Yes, absolutely. Not just Charmaine. I mean, this is money that we will be working with, not just the administrative staff, but probably the teaching staff as well, to really think about. I'm actually kind of excited about it because I think it may be giving us an opportunity to do some things differently. You just heard this evening about some of the ways we've operated differently this year. And we could expand on that. We could expand on our outreach to families. We could expand upon providing teachers with the knowledge, so professional learning and the resources to do the kinds of assessment and instruction that we want, all to support students. We've already started to talk about how to redesign summer school with some outside partners helping us. So yes, I think that there'll be a lot of opportunity for involvement in what we do with these funds. If I could read Martha's question, will these funds alter our budget? So as I shared during the budget time, these funds are intended to be used for needs directly associated with the pandemic or the results of the pandemic, and are not funds to be used for general operating. So we can't use these funds to cover the cost of, say, our school psychologists, because we already have school psychologists in every building, but they could be used to bring in a family services coordinator, because we've identified that as a need due to COVID. So I see these as funds to be used beyond. Martha's question, as I understand disbursements, all monies from former outlays have not been sent to districts. So these funds are interesting. They kind of reside in an account somewhere at the state level. And the way you access them is quarterly, or sometimes more often if you choose. You account for your expenditures related to the grant, and then through the electronic accounting system, they go into the state system and do what's called a drawdown in order to transfer the funds to the schools. So I don't know if that's what you meant, Martha, but that's how the monies are literally come into our coffers.
David?
Can any of these funds be used for the new elementary school, whether it's furniture or solar or anything like that?
So those two things that you've just mentioned are already included in the budget for the new elementary school, and I don't believe that we could identify those as needs brought on by the pandemic. So the funds are intended to be used to support the effects of COVID or operations during a pandemic. Is there a possibility we'll be given more funds? I don't think so. I think everybody thinks after $1.9 trillion, the federal government, this is probably going to be it.
I'll just jump in, as I know Martha looks like she's doing a follow-up question, but I'm excited about the potential possibility of a family liaison person.
I haven't announced that yet. It's just an example.
Oh, no. Oh, I just said the possibility.
Okay.
In remote kind of discussion of like thinking about that might be, again, to support the continued work, as Martha mentioned earlier, and as everyone sort of talked about, that would be as a possibility, that would be really great.
And Kelly, I was going to follow up with what David said. So we have all of the correct ventilation being put into the new school already from the
Correct
outline. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great example. If we didn't, we could use the funds for that, but it's already there.
And how about the middle school? Is there anything in the middle school?
Not ventilation.
Okay.
And that system is newer and it's a kind of state-of-the-art system. So
okay.
Yeah, if we were keeping our 3 elementary schools, you might have used it, although it would be incredibly costly. But you might have decided to do that. Martha's question. She means former the former allocation, i.e. dollars not distributed. I asked that same question. So interesting. The federal monies that come to us through ESSER are, for lack of a better term, use it or lose it. It's a federal allocation made directly to a district. If the district doesn't use the money in the allotted time, then the money goes back to the federal government. The state funds, they are making sure that all of those monies are used because that was the federal money given to the state. So now the state is spending their money and they've allocated it to districts. And I think they're going to keep spreading the money until it's all used because they don't want to return any of their money to the federal government. And they can do that. But right now, like if East Hartford didn't use all their money, I couldn't get some of East Hartford's ESSER money. It's not the way those federal funds work. I hope that's clear. It's a little confusing with the state money, but I think there's more leeway there.
Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
That brings us to the middle school facility needs.
Yeah, hang in there. We got one more big agenda item here. So I'm going to go back to my slides. So here they come. So you will recall that several years ago now, we started to discuss the issue of how do we support our aging facilities. And that work began with us engaging in a facility study that resulted in this report. This facility study was completed for us by District Management Group. You'll remember all of the work that went into it: surveys, focus groups, interviews, reviews, a working group, lots and lots. And in the end, they came up with these 6 areas for growth. And at the time that the study was done, we asked them to look at all of our schools, not just our elementary school. And in fact, in each of these 6 areas, you'll notice that they talk about all of the schools in general, in some places, and in other places, schools specifically. So this restrictive classroom space was an issue that was found in all of the schools. The very top one, I kind of smiled when I read it because it says classrooms are set up in a traditional classroom arrangement with desks and chairs in rows and immovable furniture. And if you walked into our classrooms pre-COVID last year, that's not what you would have seen. So we've already started to make some changes with the interior of the classroom. But if you go through this list, you'll see that the other restrictive nature of our classrooms had to do with lack of opportunity for small groups and bigger project learning, as well as some quiet independent workspaces or room for students to take movement breaks. So that was the first area. The second area had to do with flexible common spaces. You can see that Mansfield Middle School is called out specifically here: poor acoustics, flexible walls that don't move well and are not soundproof. Again, we've been able to correct that thanks to our facilities work, and the need to use hall rooms for breakout space. So you're familiar with this report. I don't want to go through it step by step, but I wanted to remind you that there are these 6 areas that were identified as a need for us to make some improvements in order to meet our educational goals. And that's really how this study started, thinking about what we're trying to achieve educationally for students and the degree to which our schools are helping us meet those goals. So we addressed the needs at the elementary level. And when we had our community events, we had a lot of comments and questions from the community about, will our facility work end at the elementary schools, or will we also consider the middle schools? The other thing that we did is that we started to put together this chart that identified all of the work that was needed in each of our schools. This is the middle school chart from 2017 that identifies for the next 3 years the work that needs to be done at the middle school and then beyond. And you can see that there are quite a few items listed here. But if you were to read this carefully, you would also see that we've begun to address, or in some cases completed, addressing these using a pay-as-you-go approach. So the folding walls I mentioned is a great example. Over a couple of years, we were able to ensure that we replaced all of the folding walls in the middle school with soundproof walls that move easily to give us some more flexibility. We've been able to do the same thing with carpeting. You can see that, by 2019-20, carpeting upgrades should be completed at the middle school, and in fact, they have been. And you saw a great presentation in January about all of the upgrades that we have been able to make at the middle school. And finally, we showed you kind of what's left. So this is the current school year, and these are the next 3 years. And look what happens by the time you get to 23-24. There's almost nothing left that can be addressed pay as you go, because what is left are very big items, big from a construction perspective and big from a dollar perspective. So last March, just before we all went home for the pandemic, we had started to talk about this. Is it time for us to think about what we should do with the middle school? So I'm bringing it back to you this evening to ask you if you're interested in doing some advanced planning. You can see you've got a couple of years still, but time moves quickly. And you quickly are going to reach the point where we've done as much upgrading as we can to the middle school. And the only way to address the issues are through some big ticket items. So let me just stop there and ask you to, if you want to react to that first, and then I can share with you some of the research I've done on what the possibilities are moving forward.
I would like to react to that, yes.
Go ahead.
In my opinion, the middle school has a limited time because of how many years that building has, i.e. the elementary schools we have. And I think we really should be thinking about, well, possibly a new school. In how many years, I'm not sure, but I think we should have a discussion about the possibility of it.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Dave said. I certainly support taking a deeper look into this. I think, if we're eligible for state funding, whether it's renovating or new building, we need to start looking at that sooner rather than later.
I'm in agreement with that as well. I think to put our heads in the sand and ignore this and kick it down the road is not helpful. But starting to take a serious look, maybe in conjunction with the town, I think is important.
So
a serious look like, Kelly, what?
Yep. So let me share with you some of the research that I've done. So as with thinking about the elementary schools, you have multiple options open replacing the school is certainly one of them. So is renovating the school. You can actually, there are a couple of ways you could get state support for renovating. You can do a full renovate as new project, or you may be even able to get some state support for something called an alteration project. Now, there are stipulations for all of these. If you did a renovate as new, you have to guarantee, or you have to identify a certain percentage of the square footage that is going to be renovated. You need to guarantee that all of your systems in place will last for 20 years. You have a heating and cooling system there that's about 10 years old. So there could be some questions as to whether or not that would last for 20 years. But there is also the option to continue to do a pay-as-you-go, keeping in mind that, again, these are pretty big ticket items that you'd have to work with the town to plan for. One of the ways that you might start this work is to hire an owner's rep, an operation project manager, OPM. Specifically a firm like Colliers International, who is our OPM for the school project. Now, there are lots of firms out there that do this work, not just Colliers, but you could go out to bid for an initial review. Often these reviews are called a modernization study. So looking to bring in a firm like that has engineers that can give you a sense of the state of your building and work with you to identify your educational needs and help you explore some cost estimates so that you then could identify whether or not you really do want to build a new building or whether or not there's enough good in this building to try to keep it operational. But that's not a question that I think we can answer without a good study. It's been some time since there's been a thorough study of the middle school. Catherine, you identified a report that had been created. I know we found it. It was a long time ago now. And so it's really time for this study to be done again, I think, before you make any decisions. But once you start to work with an OPM, then you can identify, do you need to bring in an architect? Do you need to create a couple of alternatives with an architect and get more discrete pricing? But it's kind of a step-by-step approach. And the first step would be a minor step, minor in the sense of the scope of a big project, at least, by going out to bid for an OPM. So let me stop there. I also have Alan on the line. So if you have any questions about the building or about the process, he's available to answer any of those questions.
Kelly and or Alan, if that's okay, how does this, would this fit in a larger context of the town looking at evaluation? Do we need to coordinate with the town, or should we just be working on our own in this context?
I do think we need to coordinate. Alan, you want to talk about what's going on there?
Yes, with the new town manager, we're working on the rest of the facilities and working on a facility needs study that we'll be proposing for this year to launch, hopefully, after this summer. So.
And that will be for all the facilities, the municipal facilities?
Correct. Also including the two the two schools that will be vacant at some point. So.
And I've had some conversations with the town manager about the middle school and about the need for that to be part of a much bigger town plan. And so he's well aware of that. But he also supports the idea of us doing an independent study right now because of the nature of our building, and the study that they'll be doing for all of the town buildings won't look at some of the things that we would want to be looking at.
That makes sense. I mean, we have unique needs, and yeah, it's not just a building.
So Kelly, that's not something we would sit here tonight and make a decision about. Do we need to have a subcommittee or something to explore the options, or?
I don't think so. I don't think a subcommittee is going to help you because you really need some technical information. I think instead the appropriate action might be just to, and this doesn't even require a vote, but just to let me know that you would support the idea of going out for an owner's project manager to help us begin to identify the options. Until you're ready to spend any money or propose a project, you don't need a building committee. You don't need to make any formal motions. I do want to mention one other thing, that, you know, the planning that we've been doing has also been allowing us to put some money aside when we've had end of year funds for these building projects, including the anticipation of needing to do something at the middle school. And so we have about $80,000 set aside right now to engage a study. And a study of the magnitude that I've described to you, like a just getting started study, has been suggested to me somewhere in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. Now, we won't know for sure till the bids come in. And of course, there may need to be additional monies if you need to bring in an architect as a second step. But we do have money set aside. So it's not something that we need to take out of our operating budgets right now. And we even have a little bit of money set aside to continue those projects at the middle school. So, you know, that will be something else for us to work with an OPM on, and helping us think about the financial implications of whatever decisions you make.
So am I hearing that you and Alan both think the best thing is to go forward with project manager, if that's what it was called?
That's our recommendation this evening. I want to share one other thing. I intentionally showed you that that facilities needs chart doesn't get empty till 23, 24, to let you know that you've got a little bit of time. You don't have a lot of time, but you've got a little bit of time. And we've also got a lot on our plate right now when it comes to facilities, with the new school getting ready and the roof. And so my recommendation would be that you go out with an RFQ this spring in the hopes that we could get this work started sometime next fall. I don't think this is something that you have to do immediately. But again, as I've shared, I think it's something that needs to be on your radar, and you need to be thoughtful in planning for it.
Well, that certainly makes sense to me. And I would be interested in looking at what we can do in terms of state reimbursement, as opposed to continue to pay as we go. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I will remind you that your reimbursement rate is still quite high, so there could be some opportunity for the town there.
So someone could help us explore what the best options would be. You mentioned renovate is new, or whatever the other ones were, but we can get some guidance with that.
Correct.
Okay.
I support that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense to go out and collect information before we make any decisions about how to proceed.
Martha, if I may just say, maybe we need to look at former studies and how much we have invested recently.
How much we've invested in studies, or how much we've invested in the school itself? I think looking at how much we've invested in the school itself needs to be part of the study, right? So that we have a good understanding. If we've made a huge investment, we certainly wouldn't want to get rid of the building too quickly. It's just my personal opinion, but.
Martha said the building, but we have that information, correct? That's what we've laid out.
You weren't quite clear. Could you say that again?
The building?
How much we've invested in the building? Yes, we do have that information. Alan's got really good records on all of that.
Okay. So where do we go from here, Kelly? What's the next step?
Just to let me know that you're in favor of us using some of the funds that have been set aside, and I'll start working with Charmaine and Alan on putting together an RFQ that can go out to the appropriate vendors sometime this spring. And I'll keep you posted on when that goes out. And then I think it's probably will then become a topic for some board meetings in the fall, so that we can meet with the consultant that we hire and get the work started in earnest.
How does everyone else feel about that?
I support that idea.
Thank you, Dave. Thumbs up, Rebecca. Everyone up? Catherine, you good? Elizabeth?
I'm concerned about the money we've already put into the school because I'm thinking about the new gym floor and the new locker area, and we haven't even got this new school built, and we're already gonna hit our town folks for more.
So if I can just respond to that, Catherine, I think that's an excellent concern, right? And that's part of what needs to be discussed with a project manager, that there has been an investment and the town has made an investment. And so what do we need to do at the middle school to make sure it remains a viable building for us and do it in a fiscally responsible way? I do think that's the primary question. And Dave, I don't mean to be countering your suggestion of a new school, but I don't know if, once we go through this study, if a new school is going to be the most fiscally responsible or best option educationally even for us.
Well, I'm not saying we should have a new school. I'm saying we should do exactly what you're saying to figure out how much of the school. We're putting a new roof on it. I don't want to knock the building down after spending money on a new roof.
Okay.
I want to know how much of the facility we can continue to use reliably. I mean, I don't want to, put paint over rusted fenders, but what's good here? What can we keep? I mean, like we have those 2 modules in the back of the school. Want the day when those will disappear. So, to explore the whole thing in a holistic way.
Martha said,
sorry, Kathy.
I'm sorry. Martha said she would like to look at figures first, and I've asked her what it is she would like to look at, and I'm waiting for her to respond. Kelly, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you?
No. I was just going to say, I think it's a really timely conversation that needs to happen as well, because it was appropriate for us to start with the elementary school. Like that was our biggest financial and just like need. But once we have kids who have been in that elementary school for 5 years that are leaving it and then going to the middle school, we don't want them to be stepping back from services and ability to have technology and equipment and things that they've experienced in pre-K through 4 that they then don't have access to in the middle school. So I feel like just even the progression of that is a really appropriate step for us to be discussing. Like, what is that? How are we going to make that transition for those kids the most successful?
Martha said what she would like to see what we have spent in the last 6 years and what has been projected before a project manager is involved. And we do have those figures, correct? Isn't that what we looked at tonight, Kelly?
You do. So I'll just pull that up again so that you can see it. So this does not show the last 6 years, but you have enough of these spreadsheets that we could go back and certainly show you that. Because Alan, I don't remember the year we started these, but it might have been around 2016 or 2017.
I would recall about that, yes.
Yeah, and so you can see what's projected here. And if you go to especially beyond 2024, we're looking at an electrical system upgrade for $440,000. That's in today's dollars, of course. Sprinkler system for $840,000, an elevator for $260,000, outside transit soffit replacement for $300,000, roof upkeep. That's just an annual expense that needs to continue, of course, even with a new roof. But the floor tiles is a significant issue. We've only been doing patching to really repair the tiles in the school, which are now almost 60 years old. $270,000, and windows $450,000. And of course, the concern with the windows, and that's what these little asterisks mean here. I kind of cut off the bottom of the sheet. but we are concerned about toxic materials that may be in the caulking around the windows, and once disturbed, it's a big abatement cost, and so that 450,000 doesn't begin to cover what the cost would be to do windows. And unfortunately, the windows are starting to rust, and we're going to have both operation issues with them, but also leakage with them. And there's just no good way to repair them without having to kind of infiltrate into the caulking system.
So, Martha, it is difficult to read on the screen now. Would it be possible to have it emailed to Martha?
So you have a copy of it already. It was in your budget reports, and you were given a full page copy of it at the time we did the budget. But I can certainly email it again, but you should all have access to it.
When you were going through the PowerPoint, the screen you just had up before of the facility needs, you had another PowerPoint that was different from the one I have. Did the PowerPoint include that one, or did I just...
I'm sorry, Catherine, you are so good. You caught me. I changed the order of the slides after I printed and sent you the slides. This is the other sheet. I wanted to show you the earlier spreadsheet first, and when I sent you the emails, had not caught that I had them in the wrong order. So this is the other spreadsheet, and it was intended to be a comparison to show you how many needs we identified back in 2017-18, and almost every one of these that's in this part of the chart has already been addressed. And so that was the intention of having two of those.
Could we get a copy of that?
This one? Yeah, I can make a full page copy of that, sure.
Thank you, sorry.
No, you're good.
So good to me, isn't it? No, I apologize.
You caught me. I forgot. I meant to tell you guys that I changed the order and I forgot.
Edith?
I guess I would just say that I would love to just move forward with this study because we need the information in it. Regardless of what other information we already have, we need the information that a study like this will produce. So I really don't see any point in waiting to go forward with getting that process started. Although I know, Kelly, you just said you'd like to wait a little bit further into the fall to start putting it together, but I don't see any point in really holding off for too long.
Susanna?
I'll just, I agree. And also again, Alan and everyone has done an amazing job of kind of working on things as we move along. And I just am worried that we're spending a lot of money when, I don't want us to run into some big projects that we won't be able to pay for. And again, if we're eligible for reimbursement, we need to really move forward on some of those pieces so that we can propose whatever there is. I understand there's a lot going on right now, but it feels like these are all pressing, and we like the roof. We don't want to be like dealing with mold in any way, or some other kind of larger issue, and have to be stuck as a town paying for something large. Like, again, it's great the work that we've done already, but it seems like we're bumping up against all these large projects. So I am very supportive of moving ahead too.
Anyone else? I'm in agreement with moving forward as well.
I disagree. I think with everything going on in the pandemic, with coronavirus, with the new school, with the possible building a new roof in the middle school, there's a lot on the plate with the town, with the interim manager just being reassigned, with all the financial departments getting new words from the federal government. I think we need to hold off for a minute and let the townspeople see what the roof is going to actually come into and what the school elementary's costs are actually going to come out to. We have a lot of on the handle costs that aren't projected, aren't actualized. And before we put any new projects out there for the townspeople, we should have a better idea of these current on the book projects that are in the wing.
All right, I think we need to come to consensus then. We do have varying opinions. How many people are in favor of going forward with this at this time? And those folks that would prefer to wait, as Elizabeth has suggested?
Just to wait and not spend $20,000 when we can wait another 6 months and see where things go for the town.
Could you explain to me what you mean by where things go with the town?
We have the roof project still in the works, and we have the elementary school project still in the works with funding that's still up in the air in some aspect, some shape or way. And we're asking the town to just give us permission to spend $20-something thousand for a study where we can wait at least until the next, school year starts. Give the people at least a few more months. We got so much stuff going on the last year with school and the government. We should really give focus like we have been on our students with their social emotional learning. There's a lot going on that they're seeing and reflecting on, and we are giving sight to it, but we're going to undermine it by stressing their parents out if we keep putting more projects out there for the taxpayers to have to deal with.
If I'm correct, we do have the money in our budget for this. It's not money that we will be asking the taxpayers to produce for this study. Do we have put money aside? Is that
we have money set aside, yes.
Okay.
And you do have a commitment from the state on the new school. So that money has been committed as well. And we have a upcoming meeting with the state on getting a commitment for the money for the roof. And frankly, that project wouldn't go forward if we don't have the commitment on the money.
Kelly, could you please just explain the money we have set aside? I know you said it was 80,000, but what was it set aside for? Was it set aside for evaluation? When was it set aside? How long ago? Where is the money?
Yep. So the money resides in the capital accounts, and it was money that was essentially returned to the town at the end of a school year. Actually, the 80,000 wasn't all at once. It happened over a couple of years, and it was returned to the town with a request to have it set aside in a capital account for the purpose of doing a middle school study.
And why 80,000? And then you're saying that it may only cost 20,000.
Because I think this is step one, and I think that there may be more expenses as time goes on.
So will we be adding to that account if there's money left over this year?
We could. That's a decision that the finance committee makes, that you agree to at the end of the fiscal year.
Kelly Zimmerman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not directly responding to you, Elizabeth, but I think that prior to you joining the board, when we were discussing the new school, I actually was under one of the original proposals we had was discussing the elementary school and middle school combined as one project. And then we separated it and addressed the elementary school first. And I think there was a general understanding at that point that we would be discussing the middle school at some point. So I just feel like we would actually be doing a disservice to our community to not be starting those conversations, because from a lot of those focus groups and the things that I sat in on, it sounded like people really did want to see progression with all of our buildings and all of our schools, and had an awareness that this was the future of education we were moving to. And I'm glad that we are at the point where we can start having those conversations, because the middle school has done an amazing job of working within the limited amount that they have. And I think we've done a really nice job of supporting things we can repair when we can repair them. But I agree, like that big picture conversation is really overdue.
Kale, I think to make a correction on you, I think we tried to put the middle school in with the building of the new school, and we were told by the state we had to separate it.
That could be correct. I don't remember exactly how that all played out.
So regardless of what we decide to do at the middle school, the responsible thing is to get the information, the factual information, so that we can start thinking about what our options are. The fact that, using the roof, for instance, the fact that we don't want to deal with it right now doesn't make the problem go away. You still have to address the thought and the planning that's going to go into what direction we're going to go. As far as I'm concerned, this study doesn't commit us to anything other than collecting information that we need to move forward.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I just, Edith just kind of captured my thoughts, and I just want to say, like, I second that. To me, it feels like it would be fiscally irresponsible to not plan ahead kind of into the long-term future of the middle school. And it seems to me to be an exercise in fiscal responsibility to really collect information and make well-informed decisions and plan them out ahead of time, as opposed to reacting when it becomes a crisis.
I don't disagree with you, Rebecca. That's why, when you look at these decade worth of repairs that have gone unscathed and unrepaired, that's why we are now dealing with, that's why Mrs. Lyman is now dealing with all the repairs and construction issues that we are dealing with. If we had this pandemic and we didn't have $80,000 sitting cozy and the government didn't give us money, we'd be looking for that 90,000 we used on all of our technologies. Sometimes having some funds in the bank is actually a good thing to keep there in case something happens. If the federal government didn't give us that money, we would have been using the money out of our capital fund to help educate these children and pay for all of the hand sanitizer.
All right, let's go back. Just a consensus. Those that feel we should go forward with this, raise your hand if you would, please. And I am assuming the other folks, and I certainly can appreciate Elizabeth's sentiment about, this is an awful lot for the community to have to take, but it is what it is. The buildings were built when they were, and we need to, at least, as Edith and Rebecca said, get the information and then make some decisions from there, financially responsible decisions. And I certainly would like to see what we can work with the state in terms of reimbursement for this.
I don't think anybody's saying don't go through with it. I'm just thinking that some of us are saying it might be a little bit too soon. That's all I think some of us are saying.
Yes, I definitely hear that and understand it. So Kelly, I think the charge is that we go ahead with this.
Yeah, and I don't have to do this tomorrow, so I can certainly hold off for a couple of months before the RFQ hits the streets, because we don't intend for this work to be done until sometime next school year anyways. So if anything changes between now and later in the springtime, we can certainly pull back. Also, we can issue an RFQ and choose not to follow through on it also if something were to change. So you do have some outs. I just want you to know that. But I appreciate the conversation today. I brought it up to you today because it was where we sort of left off after at the time of the pandemic, just post-budget last year. And I felt that as we had just talked about budget, it was important for us to be thinking forward about our fiscal needs as well. So I won't rush to get this out. And if things change, it's very easy to pull back on.
As Alan said, if the town now, with our new manager, is going forward with looking at all of the facilities, and our middle school isn't that the largest building we have in town? I'm guessing. So I think we want to be in lockstep with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the town uses the middle school, or had used them for budget meetings, town meetings, and it's also an emergency shelter for the town. So it is part of the town's structural responsibility.
Is there any way we can ask the evaluator to do more of a thorough assessment, or if the town can find someone to do a more thorough overall assessment of all the buildings that meet better standards and needs to everyone involved?
Yeah, because we need to keep in mind that the Board of Ed does not own those schools. Those are town properties.
So I'll just go back to what Alan was talking about before. The town is undertaking a full municipal facility study where they're looking at each of the town buildings and are in favor of us doing a more comprehensive look at the middle school so that they can put together a full town picture. Because I mean, even if the decision is made to do something at the middle school, now you have to work with the town to figure out when the town can afford to do it in the scope of everything else that the town is doing with their buildings. So I don't know, Alan, do you have enough information yet to describe what the town is looking to do in their facility study?
Well, I know it's going to be more needs centric to what the programs need at the different buildings. I think we have a fairly good feel for what the buildings themselves need to keep them up or to bring them to a better condition, but it's more on the needs side of things that they're going to be looking for now.
So the functionality?
Correct.
All right, is there anything else? Thank you very much for that conversation, everyone. Next is the Mansfield Middle School roof update.
So you heard me say earlier, we have a date to meet with the state. I think it's March 26th. We're looking to get a facility committee meeting scheduled prior to, so we may have more information to share. We'll definitely have more information to share by April, but the process is similar to the process we went through with the school. The town will do a thorough review of the plans and take a couple of weeks to offer their approval of the plans. And once we have their approval, then the project goes out to bid. The architects believe we are still on schedule despite the slowdown at the state. We are still on schedule to be able to do this replacement this summer.
And the new elementary school, we had a school building committee meeting this afternoon. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but bids are due April 13th. And then colleges and architects are going to make recommendations to the school building committee. By the end of April, we're hoping to finalize contracts. And that's where we're at right now.
I just want to clarify, the architects and the owners rep review the bids to ensure that they're quote unquote good bids. We pretty much have an obligation to accept low bid at this stage. So there was a lot of discussion about that process at the building committee this evening, but their recommendation is just whether or not the bid is an acceptable bid. It has nothing to do with them recommending one company over the other from the way I understand it.
Any questions? All right, then I don't believe we have any new business. And I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. I'm sorry, Cal, go ahead.
I just really wanted to quickly say a thank you to everyone who helped Susanna and I with feedback for the letter that's going to go out tomorrow, and for Susanna for her time with that. And then I also just wanted, I know Kelly had to review it and help us with it, but I just wanted to make sure that Kelly, you knew that that thank you was to you directly as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you, for that work. That letter was beautiful. And thank you, Celeste, for helping getting it out. Or we will be getting it out. So I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Dave. A second?
I'll second. This is Edith.
Thank you, Edith. Is there anyone objecting to approving the consent agenda?
Don't we have to make reference to the 2 letters that were sent to us before we do that?
They're included in the consent agenda.
Yeah, I know, but normally we bring attention to it before we.
Okay, would you like to do that? The Public Schools Board of Education approves Lori Brandon's request for maternity and unpaid child rearing leave beginning March 12, 2021 for the remainder of the school year. And the Mansfield Public Schools Board of Education approves Julianne Belair's request for maternity and unpaid child rearing leave beginning August 26, 2021 for the remainder of the school year. So we have a motion and we have a second. Anyone object? Any abstentions? Motion approved. Celeste, did we get any comments from the public?
No.
Thank you. Suggestions for future agenda items? Martha. Martha would like to get some information on equity. Let me see if I can get anything clear. Martha, is there anything else? Do you want to expand on that?
Are you looking just to see an overview of our efforts around equity? Yes.
Like the recent professional development you did and stuff, that would be great.
Okay, we can do that later this spring for sure.
Anything else? Susanna, did you have a?
Oh, I just need some advice about, or letting folks know that I'm part of a tri-town committee on pollinator pathways, and we're hoping to maybe engage a few classrooms and perhaps help get some support from some greenhouses to maybe start some plants to help support this project. I don't know that needs to be a board issue. I just think I need to just talk to principals about moving forward.
Susanna, we have a great greenhouse at the middle school that's, I think, not being used right now.
I know, that's what folks were saying. And I think there's some maybe other greenhouse spaces.
Yeah, there's one good one, and I think there's one at Vinton. I'm not sure about Southeast.
Yeah, because I didn't realize, and this is off task, sorry. I didn't realize the E.O. Smith one I think is pretty packed, and they do a lot of fundraising on their own. That seemed like an obvious choice, but I think that they might not have the space. So hopefully maybe taking advantage. We have some high school students on the pollinator pathway, the 3-town committee, and hopefully they will also be helping us out. So I'll follow up, and just want to let you all know that we're working on that.
Great, thank you. All right, that brings us to a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Dave. Second?
Second.
This is Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you. Any objections to adjourning at this time? All right, I call the meeting adjourned at 9:20